was forced by my mother to marry a beggar. A week after the wedding I was shocked. It turned out that the beggar was. My name is Olya. I grew up in a well-respected family, known in the neighborhood as an educated, beautiful, and accomplished girl. My mother was a stubborn woman who always prioritized prestige and fiercely protected the family's reputation. Since my father passed away 5 years ago, my mother took over all decisions in the family, including the one that would completely change my life. That day, I had just returned home from work when my mother called me into the living room. Her face was serious, as if she was hiding something big. "Olya, you are old enough. I want you to get married," she said calmly but firmly. I laughed a little. "When it comes to soulmates, they will come on their own, Mom." My mother looked at me straight in the eye. "Not later. You are getting married next week." My blood rushed to my head. What did my mother mean? I didn't even have a boyfriend. "I've already chosen the man for you. He's a good man, and this is for the honor of our family." I was furious. "Who is he?" "A government official's son. One of your business partners." My mother paused for a moment, then answered slowly. "He's the man who sits in front of the market every day. He's a beggar." The world felt like it was collapsing. I screamed. "What? A beggar?" "Yes, I promised your late father. We owe him a debt of gratitude, and this is part of the promise that must be kept." I refused, of course. I thought it was just a threat or an emotional game. But the days that followed turned into hell. My mother threatened to disown me, take away all my privileges, and even block access to my bank account. Yes, seriously. Too seriously. The climax came when I was emotionally dragged down by my mother's final words. "Who do you think you are? If it weren't for your father, you wouldn't be living this comfortably. You have no right to choose your own spouse. This is repayment for a debt, and you must pay." Tears streamed down my face, but I knew I had lost. In this family, honor and debt of gratitude are more important than the happiness of one's own child. The wedding day arrived. In front of several witnesses and the officiant, I sat beside a man dressed in ragged clothes. His skin was darkened by the sun, and his hair was disheveled. People looked at us with strange and pitying glances. I was a graduate of a prestigious university, an elite employee, marrying a market beggar. His name was Raka. He didn't say much. When the marriage vows were exchanged, he looked at me and simply said, "Thank you for agreeing to marry me." I turned away. I couldn't even look at his face. In my heart, I swore this marriage was just a formality. He was nobody. He would never be able to touch me. I would find a way to get out of this as soon as possible. But I didn't know that my life had just entered the biggest drama I could never have imagined. After a bland wedding reception with few guests, I was taken to a small rented house on the outskirts of town. The house was cramped, with walls made of flimsy plywood and very simple furniture. Even the mattress was just a mat with a thin pillow that hadn't been replaced in years. Raka opened the door and invited me in. "I'm sorry the house is small," he said softly. His eyes remained downcast. I didn't answer. My eyes scanned the entire room with disgust. This place wasn't even fit to be called a house. Where was I supposed to sleep, bathe, live? Night fell. It was our first night as husband and wife. But there was no romantic atmosphere, no sweet conversation, no loving glances. Only silence. I sat in the corner of the bed, hugging my knees, while Raka sat on the floor, leaning his body against the wall and staring at the ceiling. He never looked directly at me. "I won't touch you," he said suddenly. "Relax. I know you don't want me here." I glanced at him briefly, then turned away. "Good," I replied coldly. "Because if you dare to touch me, I'll leave this house tonight." He nodded, as if understanding all my anger and hatred. "I just want to keep my promise. That's all." Night after night passed. I never slept well. Not because the house was uncomfortable, but because of the pain in my heart, the destruction of my self-esteem, and the suspicion. Yes, suspicion. Because every morning before dawn, Raka would always leave quietly. He would come home in the afternoon or evening with his body clean, often looking refreshed, as if he hadn't really been begging. One night, I woke up to the sound of a door opening slowly. I peeked through the curtains. Rocca opened a small cabinet in the corner of the room, took out a thin, clean black laptop. Not a cheap one. I knew enough about technology to recognize it as an expensive model. He turned it on, then put on his reading glasses. His fingers began typing quickly, like a professional office worker. I was shocked. A beggar had a laptop. Could type that fast. What was he really hiding? The next morning, I pretended to be asleep when he left the house. But I immediately got up and checked the cabinet. The laptop was gone. But I found a limited edition luxury watch, which I knew was only worn by the elite. I held the watch in my trembling hands. Something was wrong. He wasn't an ordinary person. But who was my husband really? The next night, I pretended to talk to him. "Where did you work this afternoon?" He replied flatly, "At the market." "As usual." I stared at him sharply. "Really? But your clothes are clean. My hands are dirtier than yours." He remained silent. His eyes fixed on the floor, he didn't respond. And that's when I knew I had to find out for myself who the man I had been treating like a beggar really was. 'Cause there was something big he was hiding. And I swore I would uncover everything. A few days after that strange incident, my curiosity grew stronger. I couldn't just let this go. Something was wrong with Rocca, and I had to find out what it was. I decided to follow him. That night, I knew he always left after I fell asleep. So I pretended to go to sleep early, trying to wait until he left. The sound of his footsteps grew fainter, and finally the door closed softly. I heard the car start, though the sound was very quiet, as if he was trying not to make any noise. I opened my eyes slowly and glanced at the clock on the wall. It was already midnight. I put on my jacket and carefully opened the door, making sure there was no sound. I walked lightly to the window and peeked outside. Rocca's black luxury sedan drove out at a moderate speed. I couldn't contain my curiosity anymore. Why did he have such a car? Was he really a beggar, or was there something bigger he was hiding? I rushed out and followed the car from a distance. My heart was racing. What would I find? I just hoped to get some answers. The car drove towards the city center and stopped in front of a tall, luxurious-looking building. I hid behind a street lamp, trying to observe. Rocca got out of the car with calm steps and walked towards the front door of the building, which was guarded by a security guard. The security guard immediately greeted him respectfully, as if he were an important person. I was shocked. It turned out that the beggar who begged for money in front of the market every day was someone very important. I decided to follow him further. Inside the building, I saw Rocca enter a conference room. Inside, there were several people who knew him very well. They shook hands respectfully and seemed to be talking about important business matters. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. Rocca, whom I had always seen at the market dressed in ragged clothes, was actually the leader of a large company. It turned out that his entire appearance all this time had been a disguise. I didn't know what was more shocking, the fact that he was actually wealthy, or the fact that he had planned everything from the beginning. I felt trapped in a big lie. All this time I've been married to someone who isn't just different from what I imagined, but also comes from a completely different world than the one I know. Why didn't he tell me who he really was? What does he want from this marriage? The next morning I returned home feeling chaotic. I wanted to talk to him, but I was afraid. Would he admit it? Or was this part of his plan to test me? I sat on the sofa, staring at my phone lying on the table. I felt like I didn't know what to do. But one thing was clear. I had to ask Rocca directly. I couldn't keep living in confusion. In the evening, Rocca came home as usual. I looked at him, trying to find answers in his face. "You have a lot of secrets, don't you?" finally asked. Rocca just stared at me. "Is there something you want to know?" I stood up and approached him. "Why didn't you tell me the truth about who you are? Why are you pretending to be poor? Why didn't you tell me you're the CEO of a big company?" Rocca sighed deeply. I don't want you to love me for my money. I want to know if you can love me for who I am, without seeing my status or wealth. I was shocked to hear that. So you did all this just to test me? He nodded slowly. I wanted to know if you could love me sincerely, without knowing who I really am. Something inside me stirred. On one hand, I was angry for feeling deceived. But on the other hand, I began to realize how much effort he had put into searching for true love. Could I forgive him? But there was still one question that kept haunting my mind. Why me? Why did I have to go through all these tests? Could love truly grow in a situation like this? Or was this all just a big game that I could never understand? I sat on the sofa, trying to process all the information I had just received. Rocca, the man I had always seen as a beggar, turned out to have a completely different world. Behind his shabby appearance and seemingly simple life, he was the CEO of a large company with many connections and wealth. However, what troubled me even more was the reason behind all of this. Rocca wasn't just hiding his identity. He was testing love. He wanted to know if I would love him for who he was, or because of his social status and wealth. But despite feeling confused and hurt, I began to feel something deeper. Compassion, curiosity, even a little admiration. Alya, I know this is hard, but I don't want to live with secrets between us, Rocca said, sitting on the chair in front of me, his face full of regret. I want you to know who I really am. Not just the beggar you've seen all this time. I just stayed silent. Tears started welling up in my eyes. I felt trapped between anger and confusion. I felt betrayed. But on the other hand, I also felt honored. Rocca didn't just want to show me who he was. He also hoped that I could accept him unconditionally. Rocca, why me? My voice was hoarse. Why did you choose me to test all this? Why do I have to be part of your experiment? Rocca sighed. His eyes couldn't meet mine. Because I know you're not easily influenced. You're not someone who likes luxury or power. I want to know if you can accept me with all my flaws and secrets. Felt anxious. Could I love him sincerely? Or was I just feeling trapped in this game? I thought hard, weighing what I should do. Suddenly, the door opened and my mother appeared. I was surprised, as she hadn't come to my house since the wedding. But this time, her eyes looked very serious. Her face radiated something more than just anger. There was clear worry in her eyes. Alya, Rocca, my mother began in a heavy voice. There's something you need to know. I looked at my mother in confusion. What's going on, Mom? My mother sighed and sat down next to me. I know you might be shocked. But there's a reason why I agreed to this marriage and why I support Rocca. I remained silent, confused by what was happening. But why, Mom? Why didn't you tell me everything? My mother looked at Rocca seriously, then back at me. Rocca isn't just the CEO of a big company. He is the son of your father's best friend, who had an agreement with our family. I was shocked. What? My father's best friend's son? My mother nodded. Yes, before your father died, they promised to take care of each other. And your father gave Rocca a big responsibility. That agreement became a family legacy that must be fulfilled. When Rocca asked for permission to marry you, I knew that this was his way of continuing what your father had started. I was speechless. I couldn't process everything. It turned out that there were many layers that I didn't know about. Rocca, whom I had always thought of as a beggar, was part of something much bigger, much more important. But why did he choose to become a beggar? I asked, still confused. He chose this path as part of his test, my mother replied. He wanted to ensure that whoever became his life partner was someone who could love him without seeing his status or wealth. As he said, he wanted to know if someone could love him for who he is, not for what he has. I fell silent. Everything that had happened was far more complicated than I had imagined. I felt angry, betrayed, and like my life was full of lies. But now I realized there were many things I didn't know. I had just been taken on a huge journey involving many emotions, decisions, and responsibilities. Rocca stood up from his seat and walked toward me slowly. Alya, I don't want to hurt you. I know I've made mistakes. But I want to prove that I love you. I want us to start over, with no more secrets. I looked at him deeply. So many emotions were flooding me. I felt angry, confused, and disappointed. But on the other hand, I also felt touched. Rocca was brave enough to go through all of this in such a different, unconventional way. But can I forgive him and accept all of this? I took a deep breath. Rocca, I need time to process all of this. I don't know what to do. Rocca just nodded. Seemed like he understood exactly how I felt. I'll give you time. I'll wait until you're ready. The following weeks passed with tension. I still felt confused, torn between deep anger and the love that was beginning to grow inside me. I couldn't just forget the fact that Rocca, the man who was now my husband, had lied to me for so long. But at the same time, I felt that there was something deeper connecting us. I couldn't deny that Rocca was different from what I had imagined. I began to see him in a new light. Even though he hid his identity, every time he spoke sincerely, I could feel his kindness. The sincerity he showed in his every action, even though it felt too late, began to touch my heart. One night I decided to talk to him directly. I couldn't continue living in uncertainty and confusion. I had to decide whether I could accept Rocca for who he was, or whether I should leave and find my own way in life. Alya. Rocca's voice sounded soft as he entered the living room and sat beside me. I know you're still confused. I know I've hurt you with those lies. But I want you to know one thing. I never intended to deceive or control your life. I just want you to love me for who I am, not for my wealth or status. I looked at him deeply, processing his words. But why, Rocca? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I feel like I'm trapped in a big game, and I don't know what I should do. Rocca closed his eyes, as if trying to find the right words. I don't know how to explain it. I was just afraid that you would love me for my wealth. I was afraid that you only saw me as a man with a lot of money and power. I want you to love me for who I am inside, not for my appearance or what I have. I felt heartbroken hearing him. All the lies, all the secrets he had hidden, felt so huge. But the more I listened to Rocca's explanation, the more I felt there was truth in his words. I felt ashamed of myself. I had been too focused on his poverty and his shabby appearance that I couldn't see who he really was. I took a deep breath, then looked at him seriously. Rocca, I don't know if I can forgive everything just like that. I want to try. I want to try to see you in a different light. I want to see you without being trapped in your appearance or your past. Rocca looked at me hopefully. Alya, I'm willing to wait for whatever you decide. I don't want to force you. I just want you to know. I love you with all my heart, and I want us to build a life together. I felt something big growing inside me, something that surpassed the anger and disappointment I had ever felt. True love is not about perfection. True love is about accepting each other's flaws and trying to grow together. Rocca, I finally said, I don't know if this will be easy. I don't know if I can forget everything just like that. I want to try. I want to give us a chance. Rocca smiled broadly, his eyes sparkling with happiness. Thank you, Alya. I promise I'll try to make you happy. I'll prove that I love you the way you want me to. I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something better. Maybe our path wouldn't always be smooth. But what mattered most was, we had chosen to be together, to love each other. Day by day, we began to adapt to our new life. We talked more, shared our feelings, and rebuilt the trust that had once been broken. Rocca no longer pretended to be someone else. He began to show his more honest and open side. And I started to see that he was more than just a wealthy CEO or the beggar I once saw on the market street. I learned that love isn't about money, appearance, or social status. True love is about trust, acceptance, and a commitment to support each other. And even though I initially felt trapped in a big lie, I eventually saw Rocca not as a beggar, but as a man who truly loved me. We started a new life together. There were no more lies, no more secrets, only two hearts that promised to be together, without conditions and without judgment. And that was the beginning of our true love story.